I am Karen Bryla McNees, dietitian with the UK Health and Wellness Program. It is very exciting to see so many of you here, and I hear that's how these sessions have been. So clearly, health and wellness has tapped into a topic of sleep that everyone is very interested in. So, as one of two full-time dietitians at UK Health and Wellness, I am excited to talk with you today about nutrition and sleep. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what we're going to be talking about. And just make sure I have my chat box here so I can see any comments or questions. So I'm going to be presenting some content for about the next 20 minutes about how to optimize your sleep with nutrition. And at the end, we'll certainly have time for questions. So please keep note of those. I will be happy to spend however much time we need at the end answering any questions or any comments that you have. All right. So when it comes to nutrition and sleep, we have a two-way street. Okay. I like to call it the chicken or the egg, right? We don't know where kind of one begins and the other one ends, and which comes first. It's really hard to kind of decouple them, and so it becomes a cycle where we really need to pay attention to both. So if you're trying to optimize your sleep, you want to pay attention to nutrition. If you're trying to optimize nutrition, you want to pay attention to sleep. It all goes together. So we're going to talk first about how nutrition affects sleep. And then closer to the end, we'll talk a little bit about how sleep affects nutrition, okay? So the first thing to think about is what I call the blood sugar roller coaster, okay? We want to try to get off that roller coaster. Your blood sugar, or also known as your blood glucose levels, they're very important to manage because they help you with your energy levels, they help you with your mental focus, they help you with your hunger and appetite and cravings. So maintaining a stable blood glucose level throughout the day is important for good health and well-being anyway. But especially when it comes to bedtime and trying to get to sleep. If we have too much glucose in our bloodstream, right, we feel energetic and alert, and that's not going to be conducive to good sleep. If we have too little glucose in our bloodstream, that brings on feelings of hunger and also causes your body to release cortisol, which is a stress hormone that is going to also interfere with the onset of sleep. So, what do we do about this? What we really want to do is look at the big picture of a day. Instead of focusing too much, it's important to look at it close to bedtime. But to help manage blood glucose levels at bedtime, you want to focus on this throughout the day. All right. So, some things you can do to help with your blood glucose throughout the day is to eat consistently. Okay. Making sure we're trying to get food in our systems every 3 to 5 hours for most people is what they need, right? So that might look like breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe some snacks in between, depending on how long you tend to go in between those meals. We want to consume a mix of what we call macronutrients, right? That's our carbs, our proteins, our fats. We want to make sure we're getting a good mix of all of those because they all contribute to stabilizing our blood sugar. Of course, and you've heard this before for reasons other than sleep, just for general good health, but we want to minimize foods and drinks with added sugar. And I'm not saying we need to eliminate them. That's never the goal. We need to enjoy, right, our ice cream or soda or candy, whatever it is, once in a while. But we do want to be cognizant that we're definitely not having foods like that very close to bedtime and that we're conscious of that throughout the day, not having too much sugar at one time. That's going to create that, again, kick off that roller coaster of our blood sugar. And finally, related to this, because I mentioned hunger as something that actually can disrupt sleep, try not to go to bed hungry, okay? I know that sounds counterintuitive. I talk with a lot of clients who are like, well, sometimes when I'm hungry, instead of eating, I just go to bed. That can be maybe part of a legitimate strategy, but being physically hungry when you go to bed, really, feeling your stomach churning or growling, that kind of hunger can interfere with your sleep. So you do not actually want to go to bed if you are hungry. All right. So the next thing we want to think about is bulking up with fiber. Again, I know you guys know you've heard a lot about fiber in relation to health. We know it helps with heart disease, and preventing certain cancers. So fiber is also linked to better sleep quality. And this is fiber all throughout the day. It's not just fiber close to bedtime. It's people who have generally higher fiber diets experience better sleep quality. Something I want to point out too about this language that I'm using. You see, I'm saying here that fiber is linked to better sleep quality. And I'm going to use that language a couple more times in this presentation. And I want to be clear about what the research says about what we're discussing. It's simply saying fiber is associated with better sleep quality. We cannot say definitively that fiber is causing better sleep. We don't know that one is actually causing the other. In a lot of things having to do with nutrition, we can't say cause and effect. These are very difficult things to prove when you're talking about human bodies and designing research that can actually study true cause and effect of food on, again, different illnesses or aspects of well-being. So the best we can do for a lot of these things is just say that they tend to occur together and they're associated, but I don't want anyone kind of mistaking that for a cause and effect. That's much more difficult to prove. And like I said, hard to do with things related to nutrition in the human body. So fiber, I think a lot of you are probably familiar with foods that are high in fiber, but just as a review, this is going to be good old fruits and vegetables, whole grains, things like brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat pastas, whole wheat breads, oats, legumes, which is going to include beans and lentils, and also nuts and seeds. Face the facts. So, fat, we don't think about that in relation to sleep. This surprises a lot of people. Now, saturated fat is something you may heard about in terms of health. Saturated fat is generally something that's discouraged, something we want to minimize for overall heart health and inflammation in the body. And we're actually seeing that saturated fat again is linked to lower sleep quality. All right. Also, in terms of actual bedtime and that those hours closer to sleep, eating high fat foods can disrupt your sleep and maybe cause lower quality sleep. And that's because fat is a difficult, taxing nutrient for your body to digest. So, eating too much of it very close to bedtime of any kind, whether it's saturated fat or healthier fats, it could cause disruptions in your sleep. So what do we want to do with this information, right? We want to minimize saturated fats that come from things like processed meats. So, bacon, pork sausages, bologna, salami, things like that, right? Are very high fat processed red meats. We want to minimize saturated fats that come from desserts, right? Like high fat things like cakes or pies or ice creams, fried foods, of course. Now, saturated fat does occur in other things such as cheeses, but there is some nutrient density to cheese. So I think there's a place for that in your diet. We also get saturated fat from, some, beef and poultry as well. But again, those have nutrients that are beneficial to us. So I would really focus on minimizing fats from these other kinds of things, the processed meats, desserts, fried foods, because they don't also give us too much in the way of other health promoting nutrients. Again, not saying we're never having dessert or bacon or French fries, right? But we just want to be aware of the impact those kinds of fats can have on our sleep. So instead, we want to try to focus on what we call heart healthy fats, unsaturated fats. And these are going to come mostly from foods such as avocado, guacamole also counts here, I like to remind people, olives and olive oils, nuts of any kind, seeds. This would also include peanut butter, almond butter, other nut butters, and also fatty fish such as salmon, tuna, and sardines. And like I said, we want to try to eat lower fat snacks or meals close to bedtime so you're not getting that sleep disruption. Now, when I'm explaining nutrition to my kids, I like to use a Lego analogy. My kids are 9 and 12. They understand Legos. And I talk about food like building blocks, right? You eat the food, but then it breaks it down into all these different bricks, all these different building blocks to make all the different things that it needs. That's the amazing thing about our body. So, nutrients in our food, they do help the body produce lots of things, but also neurotransmitters and hormones needed for sleep. So, if we have a low nutrient diet, we might not be able to make the neurotransmitters and hormones that actually help us get good quality sleep. All right. Now, there's no simple answer here, but what we want to do is try to eat a variety of nutrient dense, minimally processed foods. A lot of the things we've already just talked about in relation to eating a mix of macronutrients, eating high fiber foods, eating heart healthy fats and leaner proteins. We've covered a lot of that already. So those are the kinds of things that we want to focus on. But variety is key here, right? Making sure that we're eating a variety of food groups and foods within those groups to optimize the nutrients that our body does have access to. And just to kind of sum this little section that we've been talking about up, here is what we call a healthy eating plate. This is actually from Harvard Health. I like this little plate. I think it's a great graphic just to remind people of this is what a generally, nutrient dense, balanced kind of diet looks like. All right. Lots of fruits and vegetables, those whole grains, the healthy proteins, water mostly as your beverage instead of sugary things, and consuming those healthy oils. Okay. And if you want more guidance on just generally creating a more balanced, nutrient dense diet, that is what we're here for, the dietitians at UK Health and Wellness. There's two of us, and we do offer free consultation. So if you'd like to explore this further, please reach out to us. We are happy to help you with that. So moving away from the food a little bit, I want to talk about caffeine and alcohol. Okay. Um, when good stuff goes bad, yeah, I generally like to think, I enjoy caffeine and alcohol, and that's okay if you do too, right? But there can be too much of a good thing. Thank you, Jacob. Jacob's got the information in the chat box there about how you can connect with the dietitians. Thank you. But yeah, caffeine and alcohol, they serve a purpose in terms of, enjoyment, maybe waking us up or helping us feel relaxed. But when it comes to improving your sleep, you do want to pay special attention to these. Caffeine increases adrenaline, which we know is a stress hormone that's kind of like that fight or flight. It's going to increase your heart rate, send blood glucose and throughout the body, right, to get ready to do something. So that is not what we want before bedtime. And caffeine also blocks chemicals that initiate sleep. So it's having an effect on the neurotransmitters, hormones in the brain that can help us with sleep too. The thing about alcohol, and I know a lot of people do enjoy some alcohol in the evenings, and it can help you feel sleepy if that's something that you're trying to do or trying to. I hear people say unwind, right? They're using alcohol to unwind, so it may help you feel, yeah, a little, calmer, a little sleepier, and it may help you fall asleep faster. But the problem is your sleep quality can really suffer. So people often notice that, yeah, I can fall asleep pretty fast, but I wake up a lot. I don't feel like my sleep was really restful and good quality. And that is kind of the double edged sword of alcohol. So, what do we want to do with this information? For most people, they're going to want to limit caffeine within at least 6 hours before bedtime. Okay. Caffeine, it takes time for our bodies to metabolize caffeine. It kind of works on a half-life situation. So as time goes on, you're getting it out of your system, but it takes time. Okay. So a lot of people would just have to figure out what that window before bedtime is where they cannot have caffeine. Okay. Um, some people it does not affect. Honestly, I've spoken to many people like that. So maybe it is not an issue for you. And a lot of people notice too as they get older, this tends to be a little bit more of an impact on their sleep too. And finally, with the alcohol, we just want to be careful to not consume too much alcohol too close to bedtime. Okay. So just maybe try to make a little space again for your body to be able to metabolize that alcohol a little bit before bed, because the metabolism of of the alcohol is what's disrupting sleep. So creating a little bit of space between if you're going to drink in the evening and bedtime. Mm. And of course, watching amounts, that's always the prudent thing to do for many reasons. But trying to stick to the guidelines of 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men, which is equivalent to about 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of hard liquor. Okay. This is another one that may surprise people, but major changes in what and when you eat can disrupt what we call our circadian rhythms. And I'm guessing in the presentations you've had about physical activity and sleep habits with Amy and Carrie, you probably have heard of circadian rhythms, but they're basically the 24-hour cycle that our body follows each day. Diet and food choices actually are one of the things that help regulate that cycle. So when we make major changes to what we're eating and when we're eating, we might actually risk disrupting our sleep. So I would recommend to people that if, better sleep hygiene is something that's a priority for you, you want to be conscious not to be making dramatic changes to your eating patterns in that time. And I will say that anyone that is trying to change their eating habits, it's usually not a good idea to make dramatic changes anyway, right? Most people do better when they, take baby steps. They do it slowly and gradually. It's a process. It tends to be more sustainable that way when people are not making dramatic changes to their eating patterns. But just again, there may be reasons that are out of your control too, why there may be changes in what and when you eat, and so just understanding that that can be related to sleep. Kiko, thank you for that question. Yeah, I would say with the alcohol, and I'm guessing, and also the sugar was mentioned with part of that, and the fat. I think those were the sugar, fat, alcohol, three main things I've mentioned that would be, we want to use caution with close to bedtime. I would generally say we're talking about 2 to 3 hours for those things, maybe closer to three if that's possible. Yeah, you're welcome. Again, there's no hard and fast rule, but you just want to give your body time to be able to start digesting and metabolizing those things. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit then in the last few minutes here about how sleep affects nutrition. Okay. Part of that chicken and egg cycle we were talking about. So, man, some crazy things happen when we have a lack of sleep, okay? Sleep deprivation. And again, I am not a sleep expert, but I understand that there's a real definition of what sleep deprivation is, right? A certain period of time where you're, sleeping less than X many hours a night. And because we all know we have sleepless nights, things like that, right? But these things I'm going to describe really become a problem when it's chronic sleep deprivation. Okay. But for a lot of people, they will experience these things even with one night of poor sleep or not enough sleep. All right. But again, the possibility of these things impacting your long term health get worse, the more sleep deprived you are on a chronic basis. So, with a lack of sleep, we get what's called a disruption of our hunger hormones. And we have a couple hunger hormones you may have heard of. One is called ghrelin. It's the hormone that initiates hunger. So when we are sleep deprived, we produce more ghrelin, which makes us feel hungrier. We also produce more leptin, which is the hormone, or we produce less leptin, which is the hormone that makes us feel full. So now we have more of the hormone that makes us feel hungry and less of the hormone that helps us feel full. It's a double whammy, you guys, a perfect storm. All right. So that's one effect of sleep deprivation. We also have a change in the desirability of foods. You guys may have noticed this for yourself, but when you're sleep deprived, I don't know, the thing you're craving is not usually carrots and hummus, right? It might be something like chocolate or ice cream or Doritos or things like that, right? You are seeking out now things that are maybe higher fat, higher sugar, higher salt, because again, this lack of sleep is changing what's appealing to us and the desirability of certain foods. Okay. And this is kind of reinforced by what's called an exaggerated food reward. So there is actually a change in your brain that happens when you're sleep deprived, where you respond more positively and intensely to high reward foods. And again, those high reward foods are a lot of things I just talked about: high sugar, high fat, high salt things, right? Like the chips, like the ice cream, like the fast food or pizza. So there's a reason why, because a lot of people, once they hear this, they're like, oh, this makes total sense now, right? I get it. There are some real underlying reasons here physiologically why you, again, feel hungrier and want different things when you are sleep deprived. Okay. So it just makes it harder to eat healthier when you are, again, chronically sleep deprived. So, what can you do? One of the things I tell people is that hopefully it's just helpful to know this, right? Once you know this, maybe you can start to make the connection between, oh, yeah, I got a pretty rough night of sleep last night. That's why I'm maybe craving this when I normally don't, and bringing just some logic and reason and evidence to the situation can really help. So instead of feeling anxious about, oh my gosh, I'm craving this and why am I doing that, I don't normally want this, sometimes if you can just understand it, that helps just deal with the kind of anxiety and stress of that. From a practical perspective, the other thing you can do is what I like to say: make the good choice the easy choice. So, not making it easy to grab those rewarding foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat. Okay. Trying to keep, and this is always a good strategy, trying to keep good stuff around that's easy, right? So, keeping some, string cheese around, keeping some easy to eat fruit, keeping some nuts, keeping some little packs of peanut butter, keeping some whole grain crackers, whatever it is, just giving yourself options that are easy and accessible, because that at least gives you a fighting chance to choose something that's a little healthier. All right. And this is my last slide here of content, but this is for the night owls in the crowd. I am a night owl. So I probably need to listen to some of these other talks on on sleep. But yeah, night owls. It's what's called a chronotype. I never knew that word before, but apparently there's different chronotypes. That's like early birds, night owls. So this night owl chronotype, and again, I'm speaking from someone who is a night owl, so don't feel bad if this is also you. But this chronotype is associated with some not awesome things: eating more later in the day, higher overall calorie intake, lower diet quality, specifically fewer fruits and vegetables, more saturated fat, more sugar, and more alcohol, and possible increased metabolic risk, specifically for type 2 diabetes. And it all kind of makes sense in a way, especially the eating later in the day and maybe the overall calorie intake and lower diet quality. Yeah, because when you're up at night, you have maybe more opportunity for eating, more time for eating. Maybe you're eating because you're trying to stay awake and you need some quick energy. Maybe sometimes you're just kind of getting tired and you're bored or whatever, and you're just doing some mindless eating. So it's a lot of reasons why that can happen. So some things you might do, these are things that are helpful for me, again, as a night owl. Really paying attention to whether you're physically hungry or not. When it is nighttime, like I said, we get kind of mindless and we might just be eating because we're bored. We might be eating because that's what we do when we watch Netflix at night. So figuring out if you're truly physically hungry or if you're just eating for some other reason. Again, trying to make the good choice the easy choice, trying to make sure you have good high fiber, maybe some protein rich snacks around based on those foods we talked about earlier. Making sure they're just available, accessible, easy for you if you do decide you need to eat something. And at night, I always think this is important, but portioning out your food, right? Don't eat anything out of the package, right? Whether it's healthy nuts or whole grain crackers or it's chips or ice cream, always just portion it out onto a plate or bowl so you can stay mindful of your portions and really try to enjoy whatever you're eating without distractions, right? Trying not to eat mindlessly. For example, while you're watching Netflix, that's one of my biggest traps. All right. So if you want more sleep support, There's a few suggestions here. You can try the Sleep Rate app that's currently being offered to UK employees for no charge. I think that's typically $9 a month to have access to that. So it's a great benefit. Jacob's put information in the chat box. You can also consult with a health coach. We have two of them on our staff. I think you talked with one of them last week, Miss Amy, but they can also help you with your sleep habits. And then tune in next week because that will be our final, I think, sleep presentation. It'll be Rhonda Henry, and she'll be talking about sleep and mental health. So we'll hope you can join us for that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.